It's September 22nd, 1780, and the British sloop of war, the Vulture, is anchored in Haverstraw Bay along the shores of the Hudson River. One of its occupants, Major John Andre, traveling under the false name John Anderson, has been rowed ashore by two tenant farmers under the supervision of Joshua Het Smith, an American suspected by some of secretly being loyal to the British, to meet the commanding American officer of West Point, Major General Benedict Arnold.
Major John Andre was a British officer. Andre was very cultured. He was, by all accounts, charming. I think he could size you up and could tell who you were and how to make you trust him and feel comfortable with him. He was an artist, and that served him very well because he was also a spy and a top spy master for the British. And why the art piece was so interesting is that he would be sketching everywhere he went. But imagine what you would want. You would want records and maps of the places that you're going. So very cultured, charming, handsome guy, by all accounts, smart, and really well liked by men and women. People felt comfortable with him, which makes a good spy.
Peggy Shippen, Arnold's wife, likely linked Andre and Arnold together, who then began exchanging coded messages for over a year. The subject? What would it take for Arnold to betray his country, defect to the British, and give up both the plans for West Point as well as the whereabouts of General George Washington? Arnold is asking for £20,000 and a commission as a general in the British Army.
West Point is incredibly important because if you control West Point, you control the Hudson. The British, throughout the war, are trying to get a hold of the Hudson to split the colonies. Boston could not communicate with Philadelphia. We wouldn't have been able to move troops or food. The only option would have been to go into the Atlantic. We basically did not have a navy, and the British were strong, so it would have been game over. They do a deal, by all accounts, and Andre would like to be rowed back to the boat, but the two tenant farmers refuse. They're tired. So the group have to retreat back to rest, allow the tenant farmers to rest. And they return, they go north a little bit, crossing American lines, to Joshua Het Smith's house.
After a likely sleepless night, Andre is startled around 5:30 a.m. by sounds across the bay. The Vulture has come under attack by Colonel James Livingston's regiment, who uses a small 4-pound cannon to force the British sloop to drop downstream.
It's now clear she's too far away for anyone to row to her. So Benedict Arnold convinces John Andre, still going under the false name John Anderson when he's in front of Joshua Het Smith and others, he's going to have to go back through the dangerous neutral ground of Westchester County. And that means he's going to have to be in civilian clothes. He could wear his British uniform. He'd be captured pretty quickly. He'd be probably exchanged as an officer, but they don't have time for that because at that very moment, Washington is on his way to Arnold's headquarters. So Andre puts on civilian clothes. He accepts papers from Benedict Arnold with details of the plan to attack West Point, stuffs them in his boot, and he, Joshua Het Smith, and a man enslaved by Smith set out that evening with the intent to take Andre through the neutral ground to the British-occupied territory so he can get back to New York City. Most of the war, a given area was under control of either the British or the Americans, at least for a point in time. But in Westchester County, especially after the Battle of White Plains, Washington retreated to the northern part, the Hudson Highlands, north of the Croton River, the northern part of the county. And the British retreated to New York City, the very southern part of Westchester County, and in between it was no man's land. It was a land preyed upon by militia from both sides, by regular army from both sides. And over time, as you often see during times of war, two gangs develop. the Cowboys loosely affiliated with the British, and the Skinners loosely affiliated with the Americans. So it's called the neutral ground, but that's sort of a misnomer. It's neutral only in the sense that no one knew if you were going through this area if you were an American or if you were a British, a loyalist. So very dangerous. Andre's hope is to just continue through all the way to New York City. It's the evening of September 22nd. They're crossing King's Ferry. They're stopped by Americans at different points along the way. They're not allowed to proceed into the neutral ground that night because one of those gangs is marauding. And remember, Andre's purporting to be an American, John Anderson, or someone working with the Americans. So he has to stop and respect that.
The following morning, Smith and Andre part ways. With some general directions from Smith, Andre moves through territory that is very unfamiliar to him and, for a variety of reasons, ends up in what is now Route 9 on the Albany Post Road in Tarrytown.
3 militiamen, John Paulding, Isaac Van Wart, and David Williams, are in place for the day looking for the marauding British associated gang and cattle thieves. They see someone coming toward them. They don't know him. They know a lot of people in the area, and they stop him. John Paulding is wearing a green Hessian coat, the Hessians being the military auxiliaries of the British. Paulding stops Andre. Andre sees Paulding, 2 sleepless nights from Andre, and he makes a rookie mistake for a top spy master. He speaks first. And he says, "Gentlemen, I hope we're of the same party." And Paulding says, "What party would that be?" And Andre's looking at this code, assuming he's among an ally of the British. He says, "The party of the lower part," meaning New York City, British-occupied New York City. Paulding says, nods or says yes. And Andre says, "Well, thank God, because I'm a British officer on important business. You need to let me through right away." And immediately John Paulding says, "We're Americans." And Andre says, "What's a guy got to do to get by these days? I only said I was British because you implied." He whips out a pass from Benedict Arnold, and it says, "Allow Mr. John Anderson through to the White Plains and below if he chooses, he being on business for me, Benedict Arnold." Paulding is literate, which is interesting. Some tenant farmers were and some weren't at the time. So now he's completely confused, right? First the guy said he's a British officer, he's got a pass. They decide to strip search him. And when they take off his boots, they find papers. And Paulding is recognizing West Point. So Andre's trying to bribe them now and to say, "Let me through, you'll have dry goods, you'll have money." But they decide they're going to take him to the local regular Continental Army outpost and turn him over to the military. This occurrence is potentially the source for a lot of rumors that developed over time that they were actually thieves. But there were laws in place at the time that allowed, especially they were officially militia for that day on assignment, they would be able to have prize if they were to capture a British officer. That could include the bridle of the horse, not the horse itself was too precious for the military, money that was on him, the gold watch. All of these were legitimate prizes for them that they were able to obtain once they took this captured person who was identified eventually as British officer. The fact that they were legally able to get that, though, has been misconstrued through history as if they robbed him.
Once in the hands of the military, it isn't too long before Washington's own spy master, Major Benjamin Talmadge, becomes suspicious enough to convince his superior officer, Lieutenant Colonel John Jameson, to reverse Jameson's original plan to return Andre to Arnold. Andre confesses and pens a letter to George Washington revealing his true name. Jameson sends out 2 letters, one to Arnold letting him know about the capture of a man traveling under the name John Anderson, the other to George Washington with the boot papers and Andre's letter admitting his real name and rank.
Washington's converging on Arnold's headquarters. Arnold is there having breakfast with Peggy, and the courier comes in from Jameson the story of the capture of John Anderson, now known to be John Andre. At that point in time, Hamilton and some other aides from Washington had already arrived and were at the breakfast table as well.
After reading the missive, Arnold calmly excuses himself from the table and announces he needs to leave for West Point to prepare for Washington's visit. Once on the water, he has himself rowed downstream, finds the Vulture, and is sailed to New York City, escaping justice. When Washington learns of Arnold's treachery, he famously says, "Arnold has betrayed us. Whom can we trust now?" The Boot Papers are undoubtedly one of the most important military artifacts in the history of our country. Yet, over 240 years later, they still provide scholars with new opportunities of discovery.
One of the boot papers that Andre was carrying had a couple of names on it. It was largely ignored because it was labeled "Addresses found on Major Andre, 1780. That doesn't sound very exciting, but I recognize one of the names there as a local Westchester County man. His name is Kennicott. Arnold had written Kennicott. Luther Kennicott was a double agent. The next name that Arnold had written was Elijah Hunter. Elijah Hunter, also a double agent at the time. They were known, Kennicott less than Hunter, as being double agents. They have been known to historians. But what's new is the connection that these names were on one of the boot papers. What does it mean to be a double agent? It means that the British thought Kennicott and Hunter were spying for the British. In fact, they were passing information back to the Americans. So by putting these names on the boot paper, Benedict Arnold was sealing their death sentence. He was increasing his value to the British. Look at what else I'm giving you. But also the British needed immediately to cut off the flow of information to the Americans that was leaking out through these two agents. Fortunately, neither Kennicott nor Hunter were in British territory at the time that Arnold himself, the boot papers didn't make it through because Andre was captured, but Arnold did. Arnold gave the names. They would have been captured and immediately executed by the British, but they were safe in the northern part of Westchester, and they survived the war. So what happens to Andre, right? And he is tried for his crimes. In the minds of all the Americans is the execution by the British of American spy Nathan Hale. I regret that I have but one life to give for my country, Nathan Hale. Hale was executed without a trial in a fashion where the letters to his fiancée and his mother were ripped up in front of him. We Americans were intent to show that we were civilized, and we were not going to do that. So the decision was that there would be a military tribunal.
Andre is tried at a local Dutch church in Tappan, New York, and is held at a local tavern to await his fate.
There is a period of several days between the tribunal and then the decision when the guilty verdict is rendered before Andre is executed. And where we are right now is in his sitting room, where he was held in this, what is today, the 76 House Tavern. And just over there would have been his bedroom. But because he was found guilty of being in civilian clothes, under an assumed name, behind enemy lines, he was found guilty of being a spy. And the decision was that he would be executed, and the practice was that spies are hanged. Andre sends a letter to George Washington. George Washington has interestingly never talked to Andre during this whole time, never seen him, although he is sending Andre meals here from his own Washington's table. So Andre is being treated very civilly. And Andre's letter says, "I would like to die a professional death." And what that means is he would like to be executed by a firing squad rather than hang like a common spy.
Washington never replies to the letter, and on October 2nd, 1780, Andre is marched from the tavern where he was being held to a gallows on the hill, where he is hanged as a common spy, but with the ceremonial proceedings befitting an officer. Washington did not attend the execution. Major John Andre's last words were to request that "you will witness to the world that I die like a brave man."
The fate of the three captors is such an important part of the story because these three men are the heroes. They resisted the bribe. They were in the right place at the right time, but they did the right thing. So Washington takes great pains to find out who their names are, and he sends a letter to Congress. I am pleased to be able to tell you that the names of the militiamen were John Paulding, Isaac Van Wart, and David Williams. And they award them beautiful medals called the Fidelity Medals, silver medals. They're awarded $200 pension for life each, which this is before pensions were even regularly available to most of the military. New York State awards them the right to buy a farm from seized Loyalist property. This is 1780 now, the war's still going on. So these three guys are the heroes. And at Verplancks Point, which is that crossing where Andre came across, there is a dinner where Washington actually delivers the medals to them himself. So it's a beautiful moment.